Here we are with our friends behind us. A gathered little crowd behind us just to listen to what we're saying. Are there any questions or contributions to start the discussion on?
How can we bring about peace?
I mean, I'm not a pacifist. I don't believe that peace comes from goodwill. Peace comes from balance of forces, from power relations, and the resolution of power relations. And you know, I mean, in that respect, it's understandable why Israel does what it does, because they imagine that by slaughtering thousands or tens of thousands of people and reorganizing the military constellation and the geographic constellation of the Middle East, that they'll be able to resolve the problem and create some peace. And by peace, they mean peace for them. In other words, they have stability and the others are controlled and contained. And that's basically the argument of the Zionists, that we will conquer territory for and on behalf of Israel in order to create a homeland for the Jews, or to maintain a homeland for the Jews that will last an enduring period of time. They've never been able to do it, but they imagine that one more war, one more terrorist killed, one more enemy destroyed, and then they'll be on the pathway to some kind of enduring peace. And the Palestinians believe that the only pathway to peace, or most of them believe, the only pathway to peace is to re-establish their authority and power as a people over their land. I tend to side with them, but the only way they can do that, in my opinion, is by resolving the social question, which of course is hidden behind the national question. And so that's a very long and complicated struggle. And that's why it's lasted such a long period of time, because it isn't easy to resolve the national question and the social question, particularly not when American imperialism stands behind the enemy, who are, you know, under the guise of defending the rights of a formerly oppressed people, are supporting oppression. And I looked at the stats about the migration of people to Israel over the last 20 years or so, and since 1990 or so, the largest percentage is from Russia. You know, these are people who've come over from Russia, been given resources to live in Israel, been given privileged position in Israel, and who want to maintain that position of privilege and advantage they've got over the Palestinian people. So that's how I don't think peace comes about through will. I think peace comes about actually, and as I said, in that respect, you know, the psychos in Israel are correct. Peace comes about by war, and Israel will lose this war. Sooner or later, they will lose this war. Yes. Yes. Well, why do you think that?
They will win the war.
How will they win? How? What is winning for you? What is winning?
When they're not threatened anymore.
When they're what?
When they're not threatened anymore.
And when's that going to be?
By Hamas.
When will that be?
Well, I don't know.
Well, it's not Hamas anymore, is it? It's Hezbollah now.
Oh, it's not
Iran,
Hamas.
it's Syria, it's Lebanon, it's anyone in the area who happens to oppose Israel.
When was the last time you went that you know what you're talking about? Because you don't know what you're talking about.
Where's the moon? Do you know something about the moon?
You talk.
Have you been there?
No, but I've
Do you know something about Southend?
But I've been to Israel.
So what?
In Israel and I know
And what does that mean? So
You
what
don't
does that
know
mean?
what you're talking
What does it mean you've been to Israel? What does it mean? I mean, you know, I remember that type of attitude from one group of people in the past, and that was white South Africans. They always used to come up to us back in the 1980s when apartheid was still in power, and they used to come up and say, "Oh, you're back, are you?"
When the Arabs appreciate their life and
When
not
the what?
want to die. When the Arabs appreciate life and not want to just die.
Not want to just die. So in other words, Israel is prepared to kill all the Arabs. That's what you're saying. That's basically what you're saying. Because if the Arabs must accept, that's it. Only the Arabs must change. They must accept what Israel wants. Otherwise there'll be perpetual war against them. Which of course is actually the attitude of the leadership in Israel. It's probably not, although some people say the overwhelming majority of Israelis support this, I do think that that's wavering. You know, they all shouted a minute ago. I heard them chanting, "Bring them home." But "bring them home" inside Israel has now become a slogan of people opposed to Netanyahu. People who have got family members who are captives in Gaza, who were taken on October the 7th. They are protesting and have been protesting day in, day out against the Israeli government and what the Israeli government is doing. And they are saying that Israel, or better said, the Israeli government, are the saboteurs of the release of the hostages. They are the saboteurs. And Netanyahu does not, what they're saying is, Netanyahu does not want peace. He wants war. So people screaming and shouting here about free the hostages. They don't want the hostages freed. They want the war to continue, because in that way the regime in Israel, ruling over the people of Israel without any popular support, threatened by law courts, if there is an election which they will lose, then their whole existential position is threatened by a potential peace deal. And that's why they've scuppered. Even the deals agreed by the Americans have been scuppered by the Israeli government. The British, the Europeans, everyone came to the Israeli government and said, let's make this deal. They refused to do so. They refused to do so because the Israel lobby that dominates politics in America, dominates politics or political decisions internationally about Middle Eastern policy by the British, by the Europeans. I mean, in Germany, in July this year, and I'm half German, in Germany, they passed a law that said if you want to become a citizen of Germany, so citizenship test, you had to agree that Israel has the right to exist. I do not agree with that. I do not agree that Israel has the right to exist. An existence of a state is determined by its actions. If its actions are inhumane, if its actions are barbaric, if his actions are anti-human, if his actions are against the people that live in the area, if the actions are colonial, supremacist, racist and apartheid, it has no right to exist. That's my view. You don't have to agree. Well, good for you. Good for you if you disagree. But you see, the problem comes in this. The majority of the people who live in the area and the indigenous people of the area agree with what I say. If the Jews want to live in what's now called Israel, they have to have equal rights with the Palestinians, not superior rights. We aren't some superior beings, superior to the others. That's the imagination and the illusion that Adolf Hitler had. And now we have the children of the Holocaust scuppering round trying to outdo Adolf Hitler in their approach towards the Palestinian people. What's your response, sir, if you want to make a response?
I think you've got a mental health issue, sir.
Oh, okay. Well, everyone has a mental health issue.
Everyone with someone who's mentally ill. Sorry.
Well, that's fine then. Why do you hang around? What are you trying to get? Some benefit, or are you my therapist?
You're amusing me.
Okay, that's good. Well, the problem is that the evidence is overwhelming. One is that the Israelis have used October the 7th as an excuse to justify slaughtering estimated 41,000 people they killed directly, most of them women and children, slaughtered with impunity, the whole of Gaza flattened, and now they want to move on to Lebanon. Now they want to move on to Lebanon. Already cleared away 1 million people. I saw a report on the BBC this morning. They said, Israel, do you mind not putting those up for now? Wait for now. Because they're your posters, and I'm speaking from my point of view.
No, you get up and
put up your stuff when you're speaking. It's not on. I can't. It's like any other person around here. If I don't put the stuff, I don't even know what's on these things. Now, the Israelis have used the excuse of October the 7th. Anybody who looked into October the 7th knows the story that we're told is not really true.
Why don't you go over there and tell them like that?
Because there's security guards who stop you going in. If you carry a Palestinian flag, I'm sure I'll be stopped from going in. I don't have any problem discussing with Jewish people. I have a problem discussing with Zionists, not because I can't discuss with them, but because they close down straight away and start making wild accusations, talking nonsense about babies being beheaded and people being raped.
the evidence for rape is zero, the evidence for beheading is zero, and the evidence for the Israeli army killing its own citizens who are being taken hostage is overwhelming. The Israeli army slaughtered probably several hundred of those people who died out of the 1,200. Several hundred were killed by the IDF itself under what's called the Hannibal Directive, whereby they say you cannot allow any Israeli citizens to be captured by the opposing forces, because that will then allow them to negotiate hostage releases, whereby they've got thousands and thousands of Palestinians, many of them children, held without trial in detention in Israel and under torture conditions. I mean, only recently there was a case where a Palestinian prisoner was raped by his prison officers, and rather than condemn the rape of this prisoner, the Israelis turned round and large numbers have protested, cheering on the right of Israeli prison officers to rape their prisoners. They go on about rape against Israelis, but when Israelis carry out the rape, they're cheering it on. So no wonder Israel has become a pariah state. And that, by the way, is indicative, because here we have a demonstration mobilized by the Jewish border deputies, who have got huge resources at their disposal, are backed by the establishment of Britain, are backed by many of the military, many of the leading figures in Parliament, many of the leading figures in the House of Lords. They are backed to the hilt by the establishment in Britain. And look what a pathetic turnout, right? So where are the people who they used to have? Yesterday there was a demonstration by the Palestinians, and there are a couple of hundred Zionists waving their flag. And when you go and talk to them, as I have many times on these demonstrations, one or two of them can construct an argument based on the official line, and the rest of them start frothing their mouths and talking about killing all Palestinians and all Arabs. That's the reality when you sit down with them and argue. And you'll see the same thing will occur today when several of them come over here. One just accused me of being mentally ill for constructing a rational argument that disagrees with the slaughter that they're carrying out or they're supporting in Gaza and they're supporting in Lebanon. And now they want to drag Iran in. And they say, oh, provocation by Iran. When the Israelis drop bombs on Lebanon, when the Israelis flatten Gaza, kill 40,000 people officially, many more than that according to the Lancet, something like 100,000 and some 200,000 injured, all the people displaced, and then they turn around to you and say, this is about peace and the protection of the Israeli culture and Israeli life. Well, nobody with a right mind in this world believes that nonsense anymore. That's the truth of the matter. So it's time these numbskulls got that banged into their head. Rationality does not side with them. Humanity does not side with them. Solidarity does not side with them. Who sides with him? A load of migrants imported in from America and Russia and claiming to be the promised land with the promised people. And most of them have never studied the Torah in their life. They know nothing about the so-called historical right of Israelis or Jews to go back to Israel. And those who do know about that, many of them Hasidic Jews, for example, you go up to Stamford Hill, they do not even believe in the right of Israel to exist. Real Orthodox Jews do not believe in Israel. They say Israel is, if you like, the work of Satan, the work of the devil, because you cannot, according to the Torah, establish a Jewish state in Israel before the coming of the Messiah. Did you know that? I'm mental, yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, that is a bit mental, it's true. The idea of Messiah and God and all, I don't believe it. But that's the argument they make for the justification for their actions. So therefore, it's perfectly legitimate to put that back to them and say, okay, so if you have a right to live in this location because you are Jews, because you believe in your faith, which of course most of them don't. They believe in their monetary faith. They're getting property, they're getting land, they're stealing resources from the people of Palestine. That's what they believe in. And once they've got a material advantage out of living there, out of being there, seizing land from others, seizing property from others, having a good life at their expense, treating them like slaves. And by the way, at least in South Africa, the South African government used to make sure that the black South Africans, they had to look after them in some way because they needed them as labour. Whereas the Israelis, they don't use the people of Gaza as labour. That's why they think the Gazans are expendable and they can annihilate them and carry out, yes, I will use the word, carry out a Holocaust against the Palestinian people. That is what Israel is carrying out. So the children of the Holocaust under the Nazis are now committing the same crimes that they claim to be the justification for the formation of Israel in the first place. And by the way, Tommy Robinson and co, you see the English flag over, Tommy, Tommy, Tommy. Note this, whenever there is conflict in Britain, which is supposedly between the races, between different cultures, different backgrounds, refugees and indigenous. Out comes, Tommy, with a Mossad sign on his chest, with Israeli flags flying behind him. And he says, we're fighting for the working class of England. The working class of England do not live in Jerusalem. They do not live in the occupied West Bank. And yet he declares 100% support for Israel. What was the purpose of the riots in England? I believe that Tommy Robinson was funded and supported to whip up hatred against the Muslims in Britain based on this killing of the children that happened in Southport, in order to whip up support, to turn the British people against the Muslims and by proxy against all so-called immigrants, based on the interests of Israel. That's right. Because it serves Israel's purpose to turn the white working classes of Britain against foreigners in the name of fighting the Muslims. So that's the game of these psychos, the psychos who are financing and supporting Tommy Robinson and waving the Israeli flag alongside the English flag. In fact, the British people, they do have some responsibility, at least historically, Balfour Declaration, all the rest of it, for creating Israel. That's perfectly true. And it's even understandable that many Jews wanted to go to Israel. There's nothing wrong with them being in Israel. What's wrong is that they claim a superior right over the Palestinian people, over the Arab people, and that right is now, it has become a battleground, a military battleground. And in that military battleground, let's be quite clear, the people fighting for the freedom of the Palestinian people are in the right, and the people fighting for Israel are in the wrong. Simple as that. Simple as that. Morally, politically, historically, diplomatically, Israel is in the wrong. Now, the only way if the Jews want to maintain their right to live in Israel or in Palestine, they must recognise equality of rights. They must recognise their equality with the other. And then, yes, they can live in peace and harmony with the Palestinian people. But if you say, we are superior, we can gun you down, we are superior, we can slaughter you, you have no right to live there. And by the way, something like 1 million Israelis have left. Many of them, you see, they say they're Israeli, but actually they got a house in Brooklyn, they got a house in Moscow, they got a house in Vladivostok, they got a house in San Francisco. They are Israelis for fun. They're Israelis for the fun, to go to Israel, to live there for a while, to be amongst our people. They get trained in this from their childhood. If we go to Israel, you're from Israel, you're the chosen people, you've got a right to go there. And once they get there, they live in this closeted world, where they think, oh, we're so free, we're so liberal, we're like the rest of the West, and if only a whole of the Arab world would behave like we do, then there will be peace. If only they accept our ideas. And by the way, many of the governments of the Middle East, the Saudis, for example, are in the pay of the Israelis.
Yes.
They're in the pay of the Israelis.
Yes.
They do the Israelis' bidding. And therefore, the struggle against Israel, the struggle of the people, the struggle of the military wing, the struggle of the people rising up against Israel oppression, which now has been recognized by, I believe, the majority of people in Europe, in America, and in Britain. Most people, even in the poorest communities in Britain, do not support Israel. Contrary to what these people over here, they believe, this deluded idea they have. Most people do not support Israel. And so, finally, after decades and decades, the struggle of the Palestinian people has become center stage of world politics. And it's a bloody and barbaric conflict, it's true. But the barbarism overwhelmingly comes from the Israeli side. Make no bones about it. The Israelis are responsible for 9 out of every 10 deaths, or 99 out of every 10 deaths in this conflict. And Hamas, they call it a terrorist organisation. Well, they called Nelson Mandela a terrorist back in his day. They called the whatever they were called in Nicaragua, they were called terrorists back in the day. They called the people in Zimbabwe terrorists when they were fighting for freedom. They called the Irish Liberation Army terrorists as well. Later they made negotiations and deals with them. Even Margaret Thatcher was dealing with the IRA while screaming about terrorism. He met the Queen. Jerry Adams met the Queen. And I remember when they said, I'm old enough to remember Yasser Arafat. I lived in East Germany. There were refugees from the PLO living in East Germany at the time. And when they went, they said, Yasser Arafat is a terrorist. Remember that? They said he was a terrorist. So, in fact, Israel was established by terrorism. That's how they did it. They went there and started shooting and killing. And then they drove the people out. And then they said, well, we've established a better and superior state. Nothing that Israel has done has benefited the people of Palestine. Nothing, and now we see, nothing that Israel has done has benefited the Jews. On the contrary, Israel has become a prison camp for the Jews, completely surrounded by hostile forces. In other words, the Zionists have led Israel up the garden path and towards its own destruction. And all I can say in the end is, the reality is, given the circumstances now, unless there is an internal uprising by conscious Jews against the Israeli government that overthrows the Israeli government, then Israel itself will fall. Israel itself will be overthrown, both for demographic reason, for political reason, and for military reasons. Israel will fall. And unfortunately for them, speed the day. Better for us, the sooner Israel falls, than to sit around in permanent conflict for decades on end with these lunatics. But the point is, where's the will? You know, it's like in all these conflicts between really powerful states with massive military resources. They can send in drones, they can send in advanced weaponry, they've got their Iron Dome, as they call it, and all the rest of it. But you see, the Palestinians are prepared to lose 100 people for every one Israeli. How many Israelis are prepared to die for Netanyahu? How many? Netanyahu doesn't want to free the hostages. He wants the hostages to be hostages, to justify his war. And yes, he's killing them. Yes, he's killing them. And the IDF are killing them too. And on October the 7th, to this date, we do not know how many of the people who were killed on that day were killed by the IDF. Some estimates in the Israeli press put the number in the hundreds. So in other words, Israel slaughtered hundreds of its own and then made up stories about rape and babies being killed. There were no babies beheaded. The story circulated the world several times over for the whole of the last year. And there are still people you can stop on the street. If you stop half of the people here, they'll come out with that stuff. Oh, they were raped. The truth of the matter is, you may remember the scenes when hostages were released, happy to debate with you. This is Speaker's Corner. When the hostages were released, what did they say? You might remember the old woman fist bumps the people who were captive, who kept her in prison. You might remember the children who did the same. Many of the young women who were released, they gave a hug to the person who had arrested, who had had them in captivity. You can't say the same about the Palestinian prisoners who have been released. They have been tortured, raped, beaten by the IDF, And then these people turn around and say, Israel is the victim. How exactly is Israel the victim? How exactly is Israel the victim? Israel is the perpetrator, the abused child carrying out abuse. Sorry?
30 kilos, and then you're telling me
What did you say? I can't. Come forward. Come forward. I can't hear.
30 kilos.
What? 30 what? Kilo. What did she say? Hang on. Shh. I can't hear you. What is she saying? What is she saying?
Come here!
What did she say? What did she say? Anybody? Meaning what?
She lost weight to 30 kilos.
One person. Which one was that? Which one? Sorry? Okay, I'll check that on the internet when it comes out. I'll check it on the internet. Possibly, I don't know when that. When was that person released? She was killed by who? By someone. By someone. So we know the policy of Israel is to kill the hostages. We know